All right, well, welcome to today's webinar, everyone. Sorry for the audio problems and the delays. Today we're going to focus on 3 techniques for making your InfoPath form smarter. And the idea here is to let the form do the work for you and to make things simpler and easier and provide a better end-user experience for your form users without you having to do too much maintenance on the form or worry about it getting too big or too unwieldy. So the 3 techniques we're going to look at today about making the form smart. The first one, which is one of the most important ones, is dynamically updating the data connections based on the publish location. We're also going to look at using buttons not just for submitting, which you may be familiar with already, but also for saving forms as well. And a little Lord of the Rings reference here down at the bottom, one view to rule them all. This is a technique that you can use to mimic the multiple views end-user experience, but only using one view in your form in the designer mode and using some form logic to make it look like you're switching between multiple views. So why do we care about these techniques? Well, you want to make sure that there are no loose ends when you're republishing forms. You don't want a stray data connection out there to not work because you've published your form to a different location, and you don't want to have to hunt for that data connection and figure out which one it is and why it's not working. That can eat up a lot of your debugging time. As far as the save and submit, you want to control the data flow. Sometimes you want people to be able to save forms in progress, but with the default they can save it just anywhere. This way you can control where the data is going, regardless of whether it's a saved in progress or a final submitted form. You also want to reduce the form maintenance and the complexity and streamline your form display. And the technique we're going to show you with making it look like you're using multiple views but only designing a single view in designer mode will help you to streamline that form display and also reduce the maintenance and complexity so you're only maintaining one view as opposed to maintaining multiple views. So, as you may be familiar with already, InfoPath has a built-in migration strategy for your data connections, but it doesn't always work for all of them. So this is a screenshot from what you would see if you tried to republish a form from one location to another. It would offer you this ability to adjust your data connections to the new location. However, it only affects connections to data sources within the same server. And occasionally, InfoPath gets confused, and it will not convert a data connection over that you thought it should convert. It also doesn't seem to work very well if you have any REST data connections as well. It won't always move them over. We're going to use a QRules command or series of QRules commands to auto-detect where the new site is and to adjust all of your data connections on form load. So this means that you can republish your form to as many sites as you want, and when the form loads, it's going to figure out, it's going to be smart and figure out what site it's currently published to, and then adjust all of the data connections to look for things on that site as opposed to the original site that it was published to. So let's go ahead and see this in progress. So let me find my trusty demo, and I'll drive that over here. So here we have a 2013 library with a form template that's already published to it. And what I want to do is republish the template behind this form library to a completely different site. So I'm going to go through the Publish menu, and instead of clicking Quick Publish, which will republish to the same site, I'm going to go to the SharePoint server, and I'm going to type in a completely different site now. And I'm simply going to march through the publishing wizard in the same way as I would before. It's a browser-based form, so I'm going to leave this checked. I'm going to create a new form library. And you can name this whatever you want. I'm going to leave all the promoted properties the same because I want the end user experience to be the same. Now here is that dialog that I showed you on the slide. I'm going to leave this checkbox unchecked because the commands that we have in the form on form load are going to do all the adjusting for me, so I don't need to make InfoPath do that. And I'm going to go ahead and click Publish, which is going to move this form from the current site over to this new au.formsboard.com site. And once we're there, I do want to mention that the site that we're moving to is a SharePoint 2010 site. So this works between different versions of SharePoint. We started out on a SharePoint 2013 site, and we're moving the form to a 2010 site. So you don't have to always move between the same version of SharePoint. You can move between the different versions as well. You just want to make sure that the form template that you're using will work with that site. So this publishing process is taking a little bit of time. While that's working, let's go ahead and explore this form. So I'm opening up now on the original 2013 site, and I'm just going to open up a blank form here. I apologize for the slow connection. SharePoint tends to slow down a little bit when I'm using GoToWebinar. Here we go. So here's this InfoPath starter form that we've put together. And on tab 2, I'll take you through these tabs a little later when we talk about views. What this is doing is automatically pulling from the task library on the site. And it's pulling in just some information about these tasks. If I go to this task library, you'll be able to see, or sorry, if you go to the tasks list, we'll be able to see that these are, in fact, the tasks that are in the task list here. So here we have a task 1 and a task 2. If I open this up, you'll see some of the names that are in there, and you'll be able to compare it to what's in the actual form itself. So right now, we only have 2 tasks that are coming from the task list. And yeah, you'll see here, so we have task 1, start date, due date, 0% complete. And in here, we've just decided to pull in the title, the task 1 and the task 2. So this is an automatic data connection that loads on form load. So when we publish that form to the other library on the SharePoint 2010 site, and we click on tab 2, we'd expect that data connection to be updated, and we expect to see a completely different set of tasks here pulled from the new site that the form has been republished to. Okay, and it has successfully published, so I'm going to go ahead and open up this form that we've just republished to the completely different site, the SharePoint 2010 site. And that should open up here in a few seconds. And here we go. So we have now opened up the same form. It looks exactly the same. Notice that it opened with no errors, even though we didn't tell it to update any of the data connections, and there are data connections on load. And now if we click on tab 2, note that we have a completely different set of tasks. And these are being pulled from the task list on the new site. So it automatically updated the data connection to the task list to point to the task list on the new site. And here is the tail end of that task list. Now, if I add a new task to this task list on the new site, I'll just call it Test Webinar Task. And there are a couple of required fields here, so I'll go ahead and fill that out. I think it's just this assigned to field. There we go. And so now if I add this task to the task library, here you go, there's my Test Webinar Task. And now I'm going to go back to, I'm going to close this form, I'm going to go back to the new form library that I just created on this new site. I called it Webinar, there we go, 2014-0904. Let me open up that library, and I'm going to open up a new form, and you should see the task that I just added at the bottom of tab 2. If we scroll down, there we go. There's that Test Webinar Task that I just added.
Jen, we have a question from Tom. He's asking, what about the submit? Will the submit be automatically updated?
The submit would be automatically updated. We haven't made that adjustment to this form as well. But yeah, you can also configure it to change the submit connection as well. And let's actually take a look at what's going on in this form. So all of the logic is happening in Q rules. So we do have Q rules in this form. So I'm going to switch to the Q rules fields view and finish loading here. This finish loading node is the equivalent of the form load that comes with InfoPath Designer. We use finish loading here because there's code in the form. If you add Q rules to the form, it's considered to be code behind the scenes. And you want to make sure that all the code has been loaded into the form before you execute any rules. Otherwise, some of the rules may fail. So we put those form load rules instead on this finish loading rule here. And what we're doing is there is a URL in the form that determines what the library is, the library that we've been published to. So what we're doing is if this URL is not blank, we are going to take stock of the URL of the library where we are. And we want to make sure that we have this library. We want to make sure that we have this library. So we're using get input parameter. And this parameter is giving us the location of the library. And what we want to do initially is set up all of the data connections to point to this new library location. And Q rules automatically knows the location that the form is published to. That's sort of the crux of this whole technique. So we're getting the URL that the form is currently published to from Q rules. And then we're using that to update all of the data connections. So here we have, oh, and it looks like we did configure this to change the submit. So what we're doing here is we're using a Q rules command called change submit URL. And we simply tell it the name of the submit data connection. That's this /submit parameter. And then we're telling it change the base URL for this submit connection to be the value that's in library. And the value in library is the URL that Q rules has detected that the form is currently published to. So we do that for the submit connection, and we go through and we do this for all of the connections. We have another data connection called get list connection, and we do the exact same thing. Let me actually open this up. We do the exact same thing. We're changing the URL for that, and we go through and we set up all of these rules that change the URLs for all of the data connections in the form based on the base URL that the form is currently published to.
Jen, can you just go in and show the submit maybe on the form?
Sure.
And then I think given our delay at the beginning, we may want to cut the rest of the presentation short. And,
okay. Okay, sorry. So in order to submit, I need to fill out the required fields, of course. Okay, those are the required fields. So now, when I click submit, and this is on the new site, and there you go, you see that I just submitted the form to the new library on the 2010 site. So it updated all of the data connections, including the submit data connection. Okay, so you want me to save and submit and is not going to take very much time at all. So save and submit, you probably already know about the InfoPath ribbon that you have the option of including at the top of your forms that has a default save and a default submit. Save is nice, but it allows users to save wherever they want to. And with the submit connection, all you can do is submit. Sometimes you want to run rules before submit. Maybe you want to update the form name. Maybe you want to update some other fields. Maybe you want to submit something to another location or update another list. Before you do the actual submit, you can't do that with the built-in ribbon forms. So let me go ahead and just show you. So here I have up here, I've just included this ribbon. You'd want to hide this and use these save and submit buttons instead. If I click save, this is going to let me save the form wherever I want, right? I can save it anywhere I want on the current site. Save as will let me name the file whatever I want. So you want to make sure that your users are naming the files according to the convention that you, the designer, have chosen. But as you know, you can't use the submit data connection unless all of the required fields are filled out. And sometimes you want to let people save things when the form is still in progress. So the workaround we have for this, or the technique, is to use the actual submit connection that you set up. But we're going to get around the required fields by using this clear errors command, which is a very simple QRules command. It's just called clear errors. And what this does is it clears out all of those validation errors from inside the form's logic. Then, once you clear the errors, you've essentially tricked InfoPath into thinking that there are no validation errors, even though some of the required fields are still blank. Then you have it set to submit to the library. Now, what you want to make sure is that you have some way of marking this form as saved so that you know which forms are saved and which forms have been submitted. So let me show you this really quickly here. You'll notice that I have a company and a contact name field. They're both required. I'm only going to fill out the company field. I'm going to leave the contact name field blank. And I'm going to click the Save button. And this is going to, quote unquote, submit the form to the form library. But it's going to leave those required fields blank, and it's still going to be able to submit. And I went ahead and did that already. I forgot to close the form. So now if we go back here to the library and I refresh the view, you'll see that this form is actually sitting here, even though there were some blank fields. And so this way you can control the name of the form. So you won't let people name their saved forms whatever they want, and people can still save their forms in progress without having to fill out everything and submit it. This is great if you have very, very long, complicated forms that people are going to want to come back to and fill out over the course of a few days, perhaps. Okay, so that is a technique that you can use to enable save and control where the users can save their forms without having to completely fill out the form and submit it all in one sitting. And I just did the demo for that. The last thing I'm going to show is something that you've actually been seeing the whole time. If you look at this form in designer mode, there is only one view in this form. However, you notice I've been switching between those tabs at the top, right? And it looks like I'm switching from view to view to view. But as you see here, I have everything in one long view. And what I've set up here, these are actually buttons. And what I have behind the scenes is a form that's called current tab. And it's set to different values, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then down below, I have multiple sections. And all of these sections, I have hide show rules on them. So this is the section that displays when I click tab 1. So I have a formatting rule here that says if current tab is not equal to 1, hide with control. So this section only displays when the value of current tab is equal to 1. And when I click this button called tab 1, guess what it does? It sets current tab equal to 1. Same thing for tab 2. Tab 2 sets the value of current tab to be equal to 2. And down here, I have a section that is set to hide unless current tab is equal to 2. So I've created all of these different sections, and each one of them I've used a hide show rule to make it display only for a particular number. And then I have a corresponding button up above that sets this field to be equal to that number. And using this technique, let me go back and open up one of these forms. Using this technique, I can decide what gets displayed based on what button that I click, which is exactly the same thing that you would do with multiple views in the form. You switch to a new view, it shows you a completely new set of fields. So as soon as this finishes loading, I will be able to go through all the tabs. So here's tab 1, there's that contact information section. If I click to tab 2, it hides that and it shows the tasks from the library. Tab 3 shows yet another section. Tab 4 shows, well, right now tab 4 and tab 5 I don't think are set up to show anything, but there's a placeholder here where I could very easily drop whatever fields I want to display. And now we have basically the effect of multiple views in a single view in Designer. And what this does is if you have a single view, your form is going to be less complex. It'll take less time to load. Imagine if you had, maybe you wanted to, you've all filled out forms where they only show you a certain portion at a certain amount of time, and then you go to the next view and the next view. Maybe you have a complex form that has 20 of these different views. If you build 20 different views using the page design and the view feature, it's going to slow down your form a lot in terms of how long it takes to load. If you use this tab and this hide show technique, you can have one view and everything is hide show based depending on what tab that the users click. The other reason for doing this is that if you want to make changes, everything is all right here in one view. You don't have to switch between those 20 different views in order to go to the section where you want to make changes to the fields of the form logic.
That's great. So two quick questions on this technique. One from Tom. Do the hide show sections improve performance as opposed to views? There's a couple of things to keep in mind here. It does, as Jen says, it does improve performance for switching between the views and for form load. However, it may make your publish performance slower. So if you've got a really long view, in other words, about 10, 20 pages, it may be that you see the publish take longer because the InfoPath Form Services is trying to render that view for the browser to make it browser compatible. And you can have issues where it gets too long. If there's about 25 pages of actual view sections, then it could time out on the publish. So that's the one caveat here, is that this works really well up to about 10, 15 pages, and then you just want to be careful. So for really super long forms, you probably don't want to do this if you're using the browser. However, if you're not using the browser, it's always a good thing to do. And then Pete had a question, will using different sections versus different views hinder performance? So once again, no, actually it speeds it up in the browser, and it makes it easier to maintain because it's all in one place. So I think that answers that question. And then Greg had a question, as a designer, one long view gets a little confusing, especially for maintenance. I agree. Both techniques, views and sections, have different pros and cons, and you need to pick the solution that's right for you. We're just presenting this as another option. A lot of people don't know they can do this with sections, and they just do it with views. And views have a couple of issues. But yeah, if you've got a long view, I definitely agree that you may want to organize them into different views, simply as a designer to maintain the different views separately.
Right. Just one final caveat to that, Patrick. If you have multiple views and you have form logic on one view may affect another one. So like if you have a very long calculation and you're getting information from the user on each view or each hide show section, I found it's easier to stick everything in one view, because then I know exactly, I can see exactly what field is affecting what other field and jump directly to that without having to switch the view and find it. So again, it really depends on how you're designing your form. If all your views are interconnected with form logic, I find it's easier to stick everything in one view.
Yeah, and the view switch performance for the browser is it's several seconds, so it's a lot faster just to use the buttons like you saw Jen do. Another question from Pete, actually a comment. I do this by setting a value on form load that hides the heading name. So yeah, so that works as well too, as you can change the form on load to change the heading, change how it looks. So I want to thank everyone for your incredible patience today, both with our webinars being canceled the last 2 weeks and with our audio issues today. We are here to demo techniques for your forms. We're going to be talking about other form technologies in the weeks ahead. We've already done demos on K2 and Formotus and Forms Viewer as possible migration paths as you start to think about where your InfoPath forms are going to end up in 4 or 5 years. We're going to be talking more about those techniques in the weeks ahead. There's a couple interesting webinars that our partners are doing. K2 is doing a great webinar on the 25th of September, and we'll be sending out information on that. We'll also be talking about the different techniques, the different migration options for people. And we do have a quick 3-question survey here at the end. If you fill that out, we'll send you the sample that Jen demoed. We're going to probably fix up the sample a little bit to make it a little bit prettier, but we will send that out by the end of day today, along with the PowerPoint presentation for those of you who fill out the survey. I want to thank you again for your time today, and if you get any questions whatsoever, feel free to contact us support@qdabra.com. And like I said, we'll get those packages and those videos uploaded in a few hours. Hope you have a great day.